Good afternoon. Welcome to the 4 o'clock study session.
The record will show that all members are present.
Thank you. Oh, actually, you're right. Yeah. Okay, he didn't contact me, but Leslie, you said somebody's going to be late or something? Yes. Okay. Very good. Roll call. All right, current business, clarification of items on the consent calendar. Councilwoman Daigle, or Gardner?
Item 6.
You want a clarification or you want to pull it?
I need a clarification.
Okay.
Want to do it now? In the last paragraph, SAWPAC has complimented the city. I want to know if it's SAWPAC has said, good job, city, or whether SAWPAC is working with the city.
They've been very complimentary of our code enforcement work in West Santa Ana Heights.
So it is spelled correctly then. Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Daigle?
Yes, on number 9, what is envisioned as far as the feedback process from City Council as these conceptual plans are being developed? That's on the Oasis project.
Right. We would be coming to the City Council certainly at a study session. I mean, the architect, is being hired so that any time that there is a concept plan, that would come to the City Council at that time as a first step.
I have a question related to that Oasis also. I know that at least several years ago, one of the plans that was put together indicated an incorporation of the branch library over in Corona Del Mar in this site. Is that being considered as one of the options?
That is being considered as an option.
Okay, good.
Isn't the item for space planning needs and things like that? So they're kind of going to be developing
What the program is going to be, talking to, a number of users in order to come up with what the program needs to include.
Yeah, but if the library is part of that process, then it can be factored in.
Well, I think that's part of the space plan needs and see what the desires of the
On item
I had
6.
another question.
Are you on the Oasis item?
Number 23, S23, I noticed that we're doing a professional services agreement to purchase furniture.
Yes.
Okay, is that normal that we do that type of an agreement?
Chief, I'm not sure why this ended up on the agenda. Was it something that is outside of the budget?
It is part of the capital improvement budget, and it was just essentially approval of the city attorney of a contract for the acquisition to make sure that, because there is a certain amount of installation and stuff that is required, so that's all.
I noticed that we went to bid, but we're not going to honor the low bid. We're doing something else.
We didn't go to bid, because unfortunately, each one of the manufacturers is different. And what we tried to do is identify the core pieces of each manufacturer to somehow level the playing field, because each manufacturer has different components in their workstations and storage equipment. Very difficult to compare apples and apples. So we did a lot of site visits, visited a couple of the factories, and tried to narrow it down to the best option for us based on our needs.
Okay, and then what is the additional customization that's involved?
It's pedestal storage units, things that each company offers that are a little bit different.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Back
Councilman, what?
to item 6. Are we getting a little ahead of ourselves in that we still are in negotiations on whether or not we really are going to even annex this area, pending on the resolution of the redevelopment agency? And it looks like from the report that this is not costing us anything to do this, that they're reimbursing all costs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You don't have any concerns with us setting some sort of precedent and giving the people over there some sort of false hope in case we do decide to not annex?
Well, this isn't the first time that we'll have entered into this contract. So our
I know
original
that.
contract, expired. So the county seems to be happy with us. The PAC people seem to be happy with us. And even if we never annex West Santa Ana Heights, it probably makes more sense for us to provide enforcement than the county.
Well, what about Costa Mesa? Because remember, they had indicated that they wanted to take on some responsibilities, even if they aren't, it isn't annexed to Newport.
And Costa Mesa doesn't have a problem with us providing this service, if
Okay.
that was your question.
That's my question.
Because the kind of agreements that they are looking at in terms of service agreements for other county areas would not include code enforcement.
Okay.
Councilman Curry?
Just a couple of things. On item 4, I understand from discussions with Councilmember Selich that that's had the benefit of stakeholder input. Is that correct, Homer? That we've, or Sharon?
Yes, because this has been to the General Plan LCP Implementation Committee twice, and we have a long list of interested parties that we copy with all of that agenda material, and there were some property owners' representatives who attended those meetings, and I've
Okay.
spoken to some others.
Great. And on item 7, we're approving the bond council agreement with Bob Hessel. It looks like Mr. Hessel wrote the agreement, but he did not include any professional liability insurance requirements on his own or for him on this contract. Is that typical of our agreements with legal counsel?
No, it's not.
Well, I don't want to hold the item up, but I suspect that we would want to include those kind of provisions in our contracts.
We do. We do include them in our contracts, and we have been using Bob Hessel for the, for these undergrounding
Right.
administrative. And for some reason, and this may have been many years ago, I have a recollection of having a discussion on that as he went out on his own, and I can't remember what it was on the professional liability insurance. I apologize, I didn't look at this agreement. Did you look at it?
I believe that I spoke with Dan regarding this agreement, and he's actually agreed to enter into our standard professional service
Fine.
agreement, which contains the professional liability insurance. What he originally presented to us was something that we didn't feel was appropriate, so he's going to be agreeing to
Great.
our standard agreement, and I'm not sure why that one's in the packet rather than the revised one, but I'll talk to Mr. Ohl about that.
Yeah, that's great. And I understand we're also approving the financial advisory agreement with Field and Roll-Up. I don't have any problems with that, but their agreement was not included as part of the package.
Our standard agreement that we usually require, and I didn't realize that what was in here was something that he had, that the attorney had presented, does have requirements for both professional and general liability insurance.
Mayor Pro Tem Selich?
No questions.
Councilman Henn, is there any items of clarification on the consent calendar?
Excuse me if this has been asked before, but I was curious with regard to the reorganization of the planning department with regard to the idea of a community development director. It was my understanding that there would be something coming back to us regarding that concept by way of reorganization. Is that true?
Well, I think I informed the council that both of those department heads for planning and building are reporting directly to Sharon, and that was the concern in terms of having direct reporting relationships. So it was my understanding that that's what council wanted to happen, other than the city manager, to where, in effect, those two departments are under the same umbrella.
Okay, so as far as you're concerned, that's a closed issue at this point.
Well, unless council, has some other thoughts on it.
That was my understanding, that,
Okay.
that we weren't going to consider it any further.
All right.
And I have none.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a couple of comments that I'd like to make for the city council.
Go ahead.
And let you know that on item number 10, the professional services agreement, I'm going to be asking that that one be continued for another 2 weeks. On item number 14, there is an issue that was just brought to my attention less than an hour ago, and that was a letter that hopefully we'll have in front of you tonight from the Irvine Company about the light poles, the steel light poles, that they are saying that if any banners are hung on those, they are not accepting liability for that. There have been some problems with the light poles in terms of rusting, and so they are going to have to be replacing some of those poles. So I'm sorry to bring this to you at the last minute, but I do feel the need to to make you aware of that, and I'll try and get a letter in front of you before that item comes up.
These are the poles that are in the ring road
Yes.
and the fingers coming out in the central area. You're right, those are something that the Irving Company asked that those poles be painted in the specific way they paid for it, and we let them maintain it because it's a significant liability problem to us liability related to keeping them painted if we damage them, so.
I mean, one thing council could do is just say, well, tonight, as far as the film festival is concerned, you will allow that to happen, but ask staff to look into it more closely and maybe come back with a recommendation for the future.
I'm somewhat confused about this because I believe the Chamber of Commerce in their taste in Newport used all of those poles and there was no comment made at that time.
Yes, but I think since that time is where the issue came up, and several poles were taken down, and the Irvine Company has been made aware that there is a pole problem in that area due to rust.
I think we ought to be concerned about that.
And Mr. Mayor, my last comment is on item number 18. I know that's a public hearing item, but I'm letting council know that I'm asking for that item to be continued for another 2 weeks also. It's the in lieu park dedication fee adjustment.
Okay, thank you, Homer. All right, number 2, OCTA presentation regarding the funding of Measure M projects.
Mr. Mayor, I was contacted by a representative from OCTA about, I think, a month ago. They were making reports to all of the city councils in Orange County about Measure M projects, and this is Monty Ward, who is Director of Special Projects with OCTA, who's going to make this presentation. And Monty, if you'll bear with me 1 minute, since council has such a long closed session, we're hoping to get into closed session by 5:15, no later than 5:30. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll take that under advisement and try to be brief. Thank you for having me here. The last time I was here was last year prior to putting the Measure M proposal to bed, and then it went to the electorate, and fortunately they passed the renewal of Measure M. So we're here to talk to you a little bit about the next steps in that process, what's going to happen next, and then an update on some other initiatives and projects that we're working on that I think will be of interest to the council. Just taking a look at the perspective on the recent election and the approval of Measure M. Newport voters approved it actually a slightly higher rate than the countywide. Countywide it was 69.7%, in Newport it was 70.2%, so very strong vote in favor of extending Measure M and continuing to deal actively with our traffic problems. In looking at the overall election, only Propositions 1A and 83 on the same ballot received more votes than Measure M. If you'll remember, 1A was telling Sacramento to continue to give us the gas taxes that they had promised in an earlier election, and Proposition 83 was, I believe, dealing with child molesters. So those are very strong issues, and Measure M did almost as well as both of those issues. The last time a transportation measure got a two-thirds majority in Orange County was a long time ago, 1912, and it was the first paved roads in Orange County. So it's been a long time since that level of support has been shown for transportation. Just a reminder of what this is going to mean just in terms of your local funds, the things that you have discretion over. To date, the city has qualified for almost $27 million of funding for your local streets, both in competitive programs and in formula allocation. By the time the current Measure M is done, you'll have gone from about $11 million to almost $20 million in your formula allocation. Under the renewed Measure M, you'll get almost 3 times that much just in formula, which means you'll be able to apply that to your local streets and your local needs at your discretion. In addition, there'll be other funds, and I'll talk about some of those in a moment. There are a number of new elements to Measure M that are not part of the current measure. There'll be new local programs dealing with pavement management and signal synchronization. The pavement management, you'll now, and for this community, I think you have countywide, I think, some of the best pavement in the county, but you do have continuing maintenance needs. But for the countywide, there will be a standard countywide for pavement conditions, that how it's measured, and cities will need to keep pavement up. That's good news for those of you who drive outside of this community, but we will move towards a more standard way of measuring and keeping track of pavement conditions. Signal synchronization is a big part of the renewed Measure M. There'll be a master plan for the county-wide, and then each community adopting its own version of that for improved signal synchronization, not only within your city, but across city boundaries. There'll be traffic forums replacing the growth management area process, which are really a way to broker some of the issues of city to city on traffic signal and street operations. There are new transit programs, extensions to the Metrolink system that provide more access to that backbone system, gateways to the high-speed rail that is expected to come into Orange County, either Anaheim or somewhere along that Metrolink system. And then community transit, which I know is of interest to this community. The ability for this community to apply for funds and compete for funds to provide localized transit services that go beyond what the bus services that OCTA provides. And then quiet zones and grade crossings for those communities impacted by the rail lines. There are new environmental programs here. In particular, I think water quality will be of great interest to this community. There's nearly $240 million in specific water quality funds that can be applied not only retroactively to existing problems with street runoff, but new problems that may occur as a result of improvements made in the renewed Measure M. Freeway mitigation will be an opportunity to handle that on a comprehensive basis, and in some cases, the freeway mitigation can work with the water quality program. For example, acquiring habitat and then restoring habitat as reinforcing activities. We'll be revising our competitive road program, our fair share turnback programs. You'll be receiving more money in both categories, or the opportunity to compete for more funds. And then there'll be new oversight requirements. We've already started the process of putting in place a new taxpayers oversight committee, and there'll be new requirements on spending reports, on issuing final reports on any expenditures this city makes for projects that it is implementing, and then new audit provisions. We're in the process right now of setting priorities. The Measure M renewal was $12 billion in today's dollars of improvements, but it didn't say which projects go first and which go last. We have a schedule laid out over the next 6 months to undertake that process, not only which projects and which programs, but how do we align the funding from the state bonds, from the current Measure M with the renewed Measure M. What sort of financing approach might we take to advance projects even ahead of 2011 when the revenues flow? So in the next 6 months, we're undertaking that effort. The decision process for doing that will involve a wide range of input, both on the technical side through a structure of committees, and reaching out to local government, business, and community groups. This process of outreach will continue not only in setting the priorities, but also as we go year to year and look at updating that list of priorities. We had a board workshop, our OCTA board, at the end of February, and really they began to lay out some of the guidelines for establishing priorities. One of the key foundations is what was the public view towards those priorities prior to the vote on Measure M and in the vote on Measure M. Things like the 91 freeway, the 405 widening, improvements on the 55 on the freeway side. On streets and roads, the continued maintenance of streets and roads was a very high priority. In the transit area, improvements to the Metrolink system, senior transportation, and the community transit services were also very high priorities. So those are things that we're going to be looking at as part of setting priorities. We're going to be looking at what relieves congestion best, which projects provide the most congestion relief. We're going to be looking at ways to deliver projects faster. One of the things we have recommended initially to our board and board committees that will be considering this is looking at, in the next 5 years, potentially putting together the delivery strategies for more than half of the $12 billion program. And so in the next 5 years, we could be keyed up to start delivering major projects and early and front-loading really a lot of the improvements that are in the renewed Measure M. We're going to be looking for progress in all of the plan elements, freeways, the transit, streets and roads, and the environmental programs. We'll also be looking at leveraging matching funds and grants, and in a moment I'll reflect on our recent success in getting some of the Proposition 1B funds in that regard. And then we're looking at not just the next 5 years, which is our early action, but also looking beyond to set the tone for the next 30 years after that, which is the Measure M period. Beyond the Measure M, renewed Measure M discussion, here's a list of the things we have as projects ongoing this year. These are just things that are priorities for this year. We're completing the State Route 22 widening and going into Phase 2 of that, which improves the intersection of the 405 and the 22 and 605 near the county line. We have a part of I-5 that's under construction right now in the northern part of the county. We're doing the preliminary engineering work on widening the 405, and a whole list of other projects. Of note here, we have a major investment study looking at South County mobility. The city is right on the periphery of that, but it's important in terms of how people get in and out of South Orange County. We have a geotechnical studies going on for a potential tunnel alignment between Riverside and Orange County. We're looking at the feasibility of that in conjunction with Riverside County, doing some borings to see if that really is feasible. We're looking at, we're starting a project to look at the terminus of Route 55, how better to handle that transition from the current freeway in the ditch to up to the surface street, and what improvements or changes could be made to handle that better. And then also, I think the Go Local City Transit Program is a precursor to an opportunity for cities to apply for funding to look at how they might do local transit programs, particularly if they connect to the Metrolink system. Proposition 1B, as I mentioned, just a couple weeks ago, we received almost $400 million in Proposition 1B funding out of the first allocation. This is the first time in probably the last 2 decades that we have received more than our fair share, our population fair share, of a state transportation funding program. So Marion Bergeson, who is, I think, a resident of the city, is a chairman of the CTC, and she was helpful not only in getting through a difficult process in allocation, but in looking out for Orange County's interests. And I think we should take it as a good sign that we're getting a fair share of funds in the first allocation here. It goes towards the project on the 22, 405, 605, improvements on the 57 freeway, and improvements on the 91 freeway, all high-priority projects. The 91 corridor, we have recent developments there I think are of interest. The Riverside County has finally awakened to the fact that they need to take care of some of the issues on their side of the border. They are now proposing not only to use their sales tax funds to add additional lanes, but to extend the express lanes over to the 15 from where they end at the county line, and then extend those along the Interstate 15 in Riverside County. This is a good opportunity to look at seeing additional capacity as much as 3 lanes in each direction on the Riverside side. We've, in renewed Measure M, proposed as many as 4 additional lanes on our side from where the foothill reaches the 91 to the Riverside County line. So we'll be looking at the alignment of those and also how our toll system would work with the proposed toll system in Riverside County. This also provides, the toll revenues will provide an opportunity to help in terms of revenues for improvements related to the toll lanes and related to better connections of our system, our TCA system, with the facilities on Route 91. And then finally, another issue that's very important regionally, Proposition 1B, there'll be allocations for goods movement coming up next. We're active in this area. The increased freight traffic from the ports, we're seeing projections of increased freight out of the ports of 4, 5, 6 times what we see today. That means that it travels on the roads and on the rail systems. Over the next 15 or 20 years, we'll see huge increases in freight projected. We need to accommodate that in some way, but in particular, we need to mitigate the impacts. Rail grade crossings, capacity on the freeway system, not necessarily in Orange County, but it affects much of northern Orange County. About 70% of that freight passes through either Orange County or eastern LA County, and only about 30% stays in this area. So there's a huge impact, and we're really asking that before any improvements are made to capacity, that the mitigation be done. That gives you an overview of where we are with Measure M and with other initiatives. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Selitz? Now, how does the city get its input into the priorities to you? Then I guess for our staff, how do we put together our priorities in the city to get them to OCTA?
Let me start with the first part of your question. One of the reasons for coming out and making these presentations is basically to give you an idea of where we are in the timetable and to ask your city, your staff, yourselves to begin thinking about how you would weigh in on the priorities. In the next few months, the board of OCTA will be making some proposals, which we will reach out and ask the cities and ask the city staffs to participate in reacting to those and giving their input. The second half of it, I think the city serves as a representative of our technical advisory committee. They will be making a lot of the recommendations with respect to the priorities for street and road funding. And
is that the competitive funding as
yes.
opposed to the turnback?
Yes, exactly. Our goal, in order to be eligible for funding under renewed Measure M, you have to be what's called an eligible jurisdiction. You have to meet a set of standards and criteria. There's a whole list of them, some easy, some hard. Our goal is to have all the cities eligible jurisdictions by 2009, and to have our first call for projects, that is, submit the projects for competitive funds in 2009. That's ambitious to do that, but we think it's important. The voters wanted to see improvements, and this is the opportunity to make that happen.
Are any cities eligible now?
No. When the eligibility process is laid out and put together, everybody will be on a level playing field in terms of the ability to become eligible. None would be eligible now. In particular, the two that will be most difficult to negotiate and resolve will be the pavement management standards and the signal coordination programs, both of which have to be incorporated as part of the city's process to be eligible.
Steve?
What's the difference between that?
Well, I think what he said was that there aren't any cities eligible right now. So as the process unfolds, we will be having study sessions with the city council and coming up with lists that you can ratify at a regular council meeting so that we can have a stated position to take to OCTA.
So you're going to bring stuff to the council to look at?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
We have a multi-year program that comes before us every year that shows potential large city projects out 5 to 7 years from now. And those are the ones that we usually submit for Measure M funding through the program that allows us to compete with other cities within the area. And I know that we have never had any problems qualifying under the first Measure M program, our pavement management plans, as well as our maintenance of effort. Is there a maintenance of effort item in the future qualifications?
Yes, sir, there is. It is, you'll start out in 2011 with the same baseline maintenance of effort that you have today, but it will then start escalating by the construction cost index on a regular basis, so that it will now be indexed upward from that point.
Okay, so partially in answer to your question, Ed, we pretty much determine what we want to ask for local projects, but I think that if there are any regional projects that we feel are important, that's the ones that we need to real quickly weigh in on in these more current hearings. And that would be like the extension of the 55 freeway, new lanes on 405 to try to free up the traffic jam that's where 73 comes in. Those are two that I can think of right now that would be ones that potentially would be part of the larger program of freeways.
Right, and as I recall, there was some interest in this community in the community transit component, which is another one to weigh in on.
Is that a 2009 deal, or is that something that's going to be...
Actually, our goal, again, is if you're an eligible jurisdiction in 2009 and there's an interest in that program, that's one of the programs we could look at an early action, depending on the level of interest and the number of cities that are eligible. But we're really looking at having early action on about 7 out of the 11 or 12, actually 12 freeway projects. Early action on 2 of the major streets and roads programs, the signal coordination and the regional competitive roads program. Early action on the transit programs, including the local community transit. So the idea being that funding for those could be allocated if the eligibility is there and the interest is there prior to 2011.
Councilman Curry?
Monty, first of all, let me just congratulate you and the OCTA staff for how you put the plan together. I was privileged to serve on the super committee, and brokering the compromises amongst all the cities and all the various stakeholder groups was truly a great accomplishment, as was demonstrated by the vote, and you deserve a lot of, you personally, along with OCTA, deserve a lot of credit for that accomplishment. As you know, there are many elements in the Measure M plan that are of importance to Newport Beach, including community transit, the major freeway projects, but also traffic synchronization, because as you may know, the city here has developed a major traffic management improvement program that we have funded and we are implemented, and I anticipate that we'll have traffic management, signal synchronization projects very shortly. And also in the vehicular runoff mitigation program and how it affects Newport Bay. That's a critical program for Newport Beach, and I'm hopeful that OCTA will also have an early action program for that element as well, so that we can begin accessing funds to clean the bay. As you know, San Diego and Sacramento have fronted more than $500 million between them in terms of early action programs, so we know it can be done, and we would encourage you and the agency to look as quickly as we can to provide the ability to leverage these funds so that we can get to them as quickly as possible to get these important projects underway.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think the sense I got from our early board discussions on this is that there was a great deal of interest in moving that forward as an early action item. There will be a technical committee put together to advise on that and to make recommendations to the board. It will consist of representatives from cities, one from each supervisorial district, or cities within each supervisorial district. So I would encourage you also to look at that as that moves forward, and the second district representative is being considered there, to look at the city's interest in that regard.
Anyone else have anything for Martin? Okay, thank you very much. Anybody from the public that would like to say something? Thank you for coming.
Thank you for the
We
opportunity.
look forward to working with you in the future. Our next item, number 3, is solid waste franchise agreements.
Mr. Mayor, we have these agreements up before council in the regular agenda, and we thought it would be a good idea to walk through some of the detail and study sessions, see if there are any issues that need to be fleshed out between now and later this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Mark Harmon, Director of General Service. And any opportunity to talk trash to the council is one I like to take. Hopefully it didn't start recording until after I said that. As City Manager said, we're going to run through the commercial solid waste program. It should give some good background to the public hearing this evening. I do want to point out one thing here on the slide, and I know I'll make this kind of quick. It's a short presentation. But I want to point this out. We do have a non-exclusive system here in the city of Newport Beach, which means we allow a wide range of haulers in to take care of our commercial waste collection. So trying to find a truck that didn't show favoritism was quite a challenge. And so we did find one, I believe that's Athens Disposal from L.A. County. So that was our first task. We didn't want to put one up over the other. So so far we're doing okay there. An overview of what I'll talk about: commercial collection, the background, current system, proposed changes, and then we have a really cool map that shows the residential collection areas for both the city and residential collection areas for some of the private haulers. I know there was an interest in that, but I want to be real clear as we move forward. The franchise agreement tonight that we'll be talking about deals strictly with commercial waste. A couple of weeks ago when we brought the notice of intent, when staff brought that forward for council to adopt a resolution to move forward in this process, the city manager's office and my office both received calls that were kind of, I'll use a solid waste term, commingling both the residential and the commercial. There was a little confusion. So just to be clear, the franchise agreements are with commercial haulers to take care of only the commercial bin waste. Commercial solid waste, the franchise structure, there are two different approaches, two different structures that a municipality can use. The first, and honestly the most common, is an exclusive franchise agreement. And that is where one hauler or a very small number of haulers will take care of the city, the entire city. The advantages to an exclusive system, quite honestly, as you can imagine, it's much easier to manage. You have one hauler, you have one set of tipping tickets or landfill tickets to look at. The fees are easier to collect. It's just easier to manage. We here enjoy the non-exclusive franchise, and that, I said enjoy, and I said it with a straight face. It is a very good system, and staff wouldn't recommend changing that. Non-exclusive does not limit the haulers. And the reason that we do enjoy it is it's a very competitive structure, and it allows the commercial businesses and large multifamily complexes the opportunity to shop around. And we think that the non-exclusive works well here with the different kinds of businesses we have. There is an application process. We do monitor the haulers. It isn't just an open door where anybody can come in and provide the service. I'm going to say why in just a couple of minutes, but it does require an application process that includes a business license, a formal application to the General Services Department. Council then approves that agreement, or has the option to approve that franchise agreement, and then there are fees that are required for the hauler to pay, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute as well. We currently have 25 franchised haulers in the city. This is just going to get a little bit kind of strange, but we have what we call 9 fixed route service, and those are scheduled routes where we have bins behind restaurants and grocery stores and those kinds of things. Think of it as the front loader trucks that stab the bins and empty the waste on set routes. And we have 16 temporary bin service, and that's your construction and demolition. That's if you're going to rent a bin to clean out, as I'm doing now. My son's moving out pretty quick, and we're renting a bin, and we're good to go. So that's kind of the temporary bin service program there, and there's 16 of those haulers. The current agreement, why we're here tonight, it was a 10-year agreement that was established with these haulers in 1996, and it's set to expire this month. So staff is here to report tonight the action we're asking council is to re-enter into a new franchise agreement with these same haulers. Tonight action does not add any additional haulers to the 25. So this isn't new haulers, this is the existing haulers. It is a regulated system. I talked about that a little bit. It isn't an open door, open border kind of that's probably not the right term to use. Open door kind of a system. We do regulate these haulers, health and safety reasons. We do ensure that the trucks coming into the city are capable of doing the work and don't have any issues with the type of equipment that they're using, the condition of the equipment, that the drivers are licensed, and that the Highway Patrol has approved all of those trucks. We also have waste diversion requirements, AB 939. Let me just, one side. AB 939 requirements. We have to, as a municipality, divert 50% of the materials collected from the landfill. If we don't do that, we are subject to $10,000 per day fines until we do accomplish that goal. So because of those reasons, it's very critical that we monitor the haulers that come into the city to perform that work. Yes, Councilmember Davis.
A couple questions for you, Mark. First, really appreciate your meeting with the stakeholders and working out these issues. On the term, we have currently 10-year term. I noticed in the resolution Section 3 and then also in the agreement Section 2 that it talks about a 5-year with a 5-year. What are your thoughts on having that as a 10-year?
Yeah, and I was going to touch on that in a sec, but that's fine. We'll do her now. It isn't just obviously one department. Administrative Services, Revenue Division is very involved in this. Public Works is very involved with encroachments to set containers. So, it truly is a group effort. I've worked closely with City Attorney's Office. We are of the opinion, because in my meetings with the holders, the stakeholders, as you said, the haulers, they did express a concern with the reduced term length, the 5-year with 5 1-years. We are prepared to change that and make the recommendation from staff to go back to a 10-year agreement.
Okay.
We understand that there are financial benefits to these hauling companies to show these longer-term contracts. So we are willing to request that.
Okay, appreciate that.
Okay.
And then in terms of the diversion, we currently have, 4 or 5 places the trash can go?
If you're talking about material recovery facilities where loads are sent to have materials sorted out, recyclable materials processed out, that's correct. There's 4 that I can think of that are in our franchise system.
Okay, and that would probably be in our business's interest to keep 4, instead of having just one company do that.
Well, you're talking about a different issue, and that's called waste flow control. If we just had one company handling it, and that gets a little dicey. The ordinance clearly states that once the material is put out for collection, not when it's dumped in the trucks, but when it's put in the containers, it does become the property of the hauling company. And for the city to say, take those materials to this facility and bypass these other facilities is questionable. And again, the more restrictions we put on the haulers, the more expensive the fees will be to collect that waste from our commercial businesses. So having those options is a good thing.
Okay, I appreciate that background. Thank you.
I talked about a fee collection that the haulers pay to be part of our franchise system. We do have a 10.5% franchise fee of gross receipts. That is well within the scope of industry standards. And there we have the annual revenue that's expected. I think these are 2006, if I can read. Yeah, 2005. Okay. So hopefully that, well, it's $303, so it's probably not a guess. So that would be the revenue from the 10.5% franchise fee. Right below that, we do have an environmental liability fund of 5.5%, and it shows that revenue of just under $360,000 a year, and that also is a percentage of gross receipts.
Mark?
Sir.
To what extent were those franchise fee percentages studied in preparation for this round of renewals?
Well, we know the franchise fees, we have a pretty good handle. Again, that's well within industry standards. They range from, we've seen 7% on up to 15%. And there was a survey done by the city in 2003, so those are pretty good numbers. We have had a lot of discussion on the environmental liability fund, and one of the things that staff would like to do, general services staff would like to work with city attorney's office and others, departments in the city, and take a strong look at the environmental liability fund, study it, and see what kind of money do we need in the fund. Should there be a cap? What is enough? Take a look at the insurance levels and go from there. So that will require some work. One of the things I wanted to do, I put just a couple quick charts up here. We talk about commercial tonnage and the importance of commercial tonnage, having it structured, having it controlled. And a lot of people think, in Newport Beach, it's mostly, residential tonnage. And you can see here in 2005, 125 tons roughly, 25,000 tons of commercial, and about 44,000 of residential. So controlling, having a good structure, having a really good franchise system for our commercial haulers. I don't think it's too far to say it really impacts the health and safety of the community if we don't monitor this very close.
Of your commercial tonnage, what percentage of that do you think is concrete, paving, dirt, whatever it is, as opposed to just plain garbage?
Well, you know what? That's a great question. Thank you. A lot of, here what you see on the temporary bin, now I've taken that commercial tonnage and I've divided it up into temporary bins and then the fixed route service that I was talking about. The temporary bins, in answer to your question, Councilmember Webb, is mostly your C&D, which is your lumber and your concrete, your paving and window frames and that kind of a thing, demolition materials. I would say on that, 38,000 tons that you can pull out, 70% of it would be recyclable, 75%. Some MRFs are pulling out of their C&D waste. And there are several haulers represented here this afternoon, so they I'm sure won't mind standing up and correcting me if that's off a little bit. Fixed route service, the 85,000 tons represented there, that is mostly, though a good portion of that can be recycled, a lot of that's your restaurant waste behind grocery stores and those kinds of things. And once you get wet trash in there, it's kind of hard to get good recyclables out. I put an interesting note up there, excuse me, on the fixed route service, what is that, 69% that is collected on fixed route, that is all collected by 4 haulers. So when we talk about 25 franchised haulers, 21 mostly do the temporary bins, the C&D and those things. 4 haulers, CR&R, Rainbow, Ware, Waste Management are the collectors of your fixed, for the most part, collectors of your fixed route tonnages, your fixed route bins. Franchise fees, kind of the same type thing, breakdown on the fees. You'll see your temporary bins for construction, demolition, house clean out only accounts for 12% of franchise fees. Your fixed route, those same 4 haulers, account for 88% of the fees, just a little better than $1 million. And those 4 haulers are the same ones that have the MRFs, the facilities that sort the waste and the recyclables. Real important proposed changes in the franchise agreement. We already discussed the term. There has been a request from the haulers to make that a fixed 10-year, and staff is willing to make that recommendation.
Mark?
Sir.
Could you comment on what the advantages to the city are on a 5-year with the renewables versus a 10-year? You obviously must have felt there were some advantages if you recommended it.
The reason we went with a 5-year, Councilmember Selich, was because of all of the changes in the industry. There's a lot of effort towards transformation facilities that will take waste and convert it into usable electricity. There is such a facility in Long Beach at this time. It's called the SURF facility. There's a lot of discussion with the use of alternative fuels and different types of collection of equipment. There is a lot of talk about using some automated equipment in commercial areas. The industry will see a change over the next several years, and our thinking was if we went ahead with the 5-year franchise agreement, that would give us time in 5 years to look at those changes and see if, in fact, the agreements needed to change to catch up with that. In talking with the haulers, they make a lot of sense that these 10-year agreements allow them, if they're purchasing new collection equipment historically has a life of 10 years. If they're purchasing new trucks, it's hard to do that banked on a 5-year contract. So we think the 10 years is workable for both sides. We agree with it.
Just to follow up on that, so if we have the 10 years, though, and we decide as a city that we want to go towards a higher percentage, 50%, and more reuse and that sort of thing, we are limiting our ability to do that sort of thing?
No, not at all. There's still the clause in the agreement that the city can take a look at the terms and redo the terms at that time. We can jointly cancel the agreements and look for a better way to do business. And I will say the haulers are just as interested in doing that. They are under, as part of the franchise agreement, they have to divert the 50%. So not only is it the right thing to do, and they do that nonetheless, it is required as part of the agreement. So they're looking at ways, consistently looking at ways to increase that diversion. It's a partnership.
Mark,
Sir.
I'm a little bit confused here. About what diversion do we get with our waste that we haul up to the sorting facility?
We, now, for residential waste.
For residential waste.
Yeah, residential waste isn't as clean, obviously, as commercial. But we get approximately 30% diversion from our residential waste. But combined, the city of Newport Beach, we just received our numbers from the State Waste Board for 2005. They work a little slow, but 2005. The city of Newport Beach was at 57% diversion. The 50% goal has not been reached by a whole lot of cities. So we're pretty proud of that. We think this kind of a franchise system and taking our materials residential to a MRF is working.
Okay, I guess my concern was to offset what we can't get the 50% on in the residential. Shouldn't we be asking the commercial guys to do higher than 50%? Shouldn't they be 55 or 60%?
No, because look at the tonnage. And let me just go back here. Look at the tonnage on residential versus commercial. If you know, just playing the numbers, if you do 30% residential and you're at better than 50% commercial, because many of them, we have haulers that will do a construction job and recycle the whole thing. I mean, so if you look at the numbers, if we get 55% commercial, we're home.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. The 55% will offset the residential probably.
Right. We have the mandate of 50, but many.
If all of the commercial came in just at 50%, we'd be short.
That's safe to say.
In terms of the amount.
To get 57, I mean, that means the commercial people are probably doing about 62, something like that.
Yeah, they're doing a great job.
Yeah. So part of how much gets recycled would depend on the recycling operation and the MRF and how all that works. Wouldn't that be part of it?
Well, sure. And you can pay up. We take our residential material to a MRF. If you pay more at that MRF, they will run your materials through twice or 3 times, and they'll capture more. But when you look at the numbers and you look at the 57%, there's a balance there on being financially responsible and getting 65%. Get back here. Okay, a couple of the other changes real quick, because I want to give time for questions. Late charges, Section 4E, that's just clearly spelling out what the late charges will be. and some interest charges on late payments of the franchise fees. Cash deposit, Section 5. The haulers that drop temporary bins, roll-off containers in the city are required to put a deposit up with the Revenue Division. That deposit went from $3,000 to $5,000. Disposal requirements, real important, Section 6. That's where it mandates the 50% recycling. And that also clearly states that the waste collected must be taken to a state-certified recycling facility or disposal site. You can't just drop it somewhere. Franchise records and franchise records appeal, that just spells out clearly what the city expects if we do an audit at a facility. We expect those records to be up front and contain all the information we need. And then there's an appeal process, in fairness, that if there's a question from the hauler that, wait a minute, that's not the right numbers, they can appeal that. Hours of operation, we put in there, and I wanted to specifically say those. That's important. On the commercial, 5 a.m. in the morning to 6:30 p.m. at night. Residential, 7 a.m. to 6:30. And on weekends, no hauling except between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. So we're trying to, there was some discrepancy between the noise ordinance and the solid waste ordinance, and so this kind of puts that all together. And finally, vehicles and equipment, Section 13. I talked a little bit about that. We closely monitor the type of equipment that comes into the city. If there's leakage out the tailgate, there's water quality issues if that happens. If there's vehicles that are high polluting vehicles, smoke's coming out, though that's going away with the alternative fuels, but if that happens, we take a very close look at that. And I have the authority to ask that hauling company to remove that equipment from the city. We make sure that the operators are licensed correctly and that the equipment has passed California Highway Patrol inspections. Challenges, real quick, non-franchise haulers will always be our challenge. They sneak into town, and enforcement's a big issue. We do have an issue right now. I met with Ware Disposal, and we discussed a very important issue, and that has to do with this whole recycling type of process. A hauler will put a bin down. A company will fill it with newspaper. That newspaper and that bin will be worth $100. They'll pay the company $50. They walk away with the newspaper. They've now charged, in essence, $50 for that newspaper. But because there isn't an invoice to that company, they say they don't owe us the 16%. So we'll be working through that issue as well. There's a net cost to picking something up, and that cost that's passed on to the person putting the materials in the bin is subject to the 16%, or should be. And that's been kind of a loophole that some haulers are going around. Outreach to haulers, I did have meetings with almost all of the haulers, and we've mailed copies of all of this information to all 25. In fact, we've mailed it twice. And we did receive 2 calls from the C&D haulers, and those were just some clarification questions. So we feel it's a good document and will serve us well, and continue to serve us well, on our diversion and keeping the city clean over the next 10 years. And with that, I'd entertain questions.
I had questions, I think, for Glenn. I had questions about the agreement.
It's all his.
Thanks again, Mark. There are some questions on Section 9. There was a Section 9 to the 1996 agreement, and then we have Section 9 today. And apparently there were some changes on including a provision requiring the city to provide confidentiality agreements before conducting the audit. I mean, what are our current practices as far as that?
We have had 4 audit cycles since in the last 11 years on these agreements, and we've used both internal auditors, city staff, and contract auditors. Our contract auditors are obligated by the professional services agreement to maintain the information confidential. So we already execute with those contract audits. The agreements themselves provide that the information collected in an audit shall be kept confidential. And there's a state law that requires that information that we collect in tax administration not be disclosed to the public without court order. So we think we have enough protections in place today to keep the information confidential.
Okay, thank you.
How often do we audit these companies?
Historically, we've done 3-year audits. The challenge in 3-year audits, Mayor, is that often we're so out of whack at 3 years that the findings are significant and the challenges in resolving the audit issues can be more significant. So more recently, this last year, we've begun contracting with a service that takes a regular review of the hauler's records, the tonnage records and the franchise fee payments, and reconciles those annually now. So the issues tend not to be as great in terms of audit findings.
Do you encounter much, I don't want to call it fraud, but missed tonnage or missed franchise fees?
Often, as Mark Harmon had related previously, there's discrepancies in the perception of the requirements of the agreements and the ordinance and what constitutes gross receipts, what portions of their business should be included, and that's why we audit. So with 25 haulers, we do find a fair amount of disparity in what their perception is relative to what our interpretation of the ordinance is. But I think resolving that, more frequently, annually, is a better practice for the haulers in the city and improves on the relationship between the city and the haulers.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question to Mark again. I'm stuck on percentages. I just did the math. If we continue to do 30% of our residential, the haulers all have to average at least 55% in order for us to not have to increase our averages. Don't you think it would be prudent for us, instead of requiring them to do 50%, to do 55%, so that we are certain that we don't have to make up that full 20% in case every hauler came through with 50%?
I think that might be prudent. I know we're also looking at residential programs. There have been some improvements at MRFs, improvements in the way of pulling additional recycling materials from residential. I don't think there's any problem if we raise that to 55% on the commercial, but I honestly believe we will be at 57 or higher as time moves along. We're looking at different options for recycling materials, so I'm not concerned, but if the math works out better to do a 55, I guess staff can do that.
For instance, what would be the additional cost for our residential if we had to increase it from 30 to 40%?
I'd have to get that cost. I don't know.
One question, though. Some of the commercial is also the multifamily residential. So would there be a way to distinguish that? Would it be just as difficult to gain, say, a 55% for the commercial haulers that pick up the multifamily residential?
Yeah, I think that would be a struggle. I think that's a good point. But in comparison, the percentage of multifamily mixed waste that makes up commercial is very small. So if we wanted to, I understand the question, if we wanted to ensure that we stay above the state mandate by increasing the commercial diversion level, we can do that.
Mark, I don't know this for a fact, but it would just seem to me, with all of the building that has been taking place in the last few years, remodeling, additions and things like that, that there really is a lot of building waste, and that has a high percentage rate of being recycled. So if that goes away or lessens drastically, then is it realistic to think that the rest of the commercial outside of the building community could meet their 55 with that problem?
I think so. I really do. I think, again, the MRFs and the processing of commercial materials, the screening, the C&D, the green waste lines in these MRFs, I see it only going up. And the 50% is tied into the state mandate, so we tried to tie that into the commercial hauler. I would rather, honestly, this is monitored every year, our diversion, and if it starts to slide, to work with the haulers, we have a very good relationship with them and come up with new programs or different things we can do.
Maybe we could propose something to where it gradually increases from, starts off at 50%, by 5 years they have to be 55%.
That's not a bad idea, especially since the state, even though a lot of cities haven't made the 50, the state's talking about going even higher. So the challenge will never end.
That's why I'm concerned with us locking into a 10-year program at a 50%, which is the bare minimum, as opposed to asking for something a little higher.
No, I'd have to ask city attorney, could we still come back tonight with first reading if we made a 50% and a 55, kind of a sliding scale thing?
I think if the amendment is made prior to the first reading, as the action item would be with the detailed amendments to that first reading, then we could go ahead with it.
Okay. We're making the change on the term anyway, to a fixed 10 years. We can make that change. It's a 10-year contract, 5 years out, it goes to 55%. That's
A percent a year added on or something.
That's a very good idea.
Mark, do we make any distinction between recycling and resale? I know that's become a much bigger thing, that the door is worth $3 recycled, but $30 when we resell it as a door.
No, recycle and reuse is kind of a convenient term. Anything from the solid waste perspective, anything that stays out of the landfill, whether it's reused or ground up and used again, is all good. In fact, I know we're running out of time, but that's a very interesting comment because a lot of the recycled C&D waste is actually reused down in places like Mexico to aid in their building and some of their things. So it really, truly is reused. It's a neat concept.
I think Councilman Witt brings up some good points, and, I'm really more bothered by going to a 10-year agreement because it seems like it's such a dynamic, changing industry that we're really locking ourselves in here. And with 25 different commercial haulers, it doesn't seem like we're, having a shortage of potential haulers coming into town. So if, somebody was impaired because the 5 years wasn't long enough to amortize a truck or some other piece of equipment, it doesn't seem like we're having any shortage of haulers. So with the way this industry's changed, it just seems like 10 years is an awful long time to get locked in.
May I add a thought to that? The state law requires for any permit or franchise that's given to a hauler that we're required to give them what they call a 5-year notice if we're going to change the term, or cancel the franchise. So in a way, a 10-year term might make sense in that at the end of 5 years, we would look at it, and if there was some reason we would want to cancel it, we'd have to give them a 5-year notice anyway.
Well, how did that play into the original proposal with the 5 years and then the renewal structure that was in there?
I don't know how that was thought through. It did play into that decision, and that's why when the staff went through, when I found out that the staff had requested the 5-year, it was something that I pointed out, that it's better to go to the 10-year anyway.
Into 10-year, okay.
I was asked to clarify one comment. In the commercial hauling hours, starting at, what did I say, 5 a.m. on commercial hauling, that raised one question. That is only if it is 500 feet from any residential property. In other words, if you live right behind a store at 5 in the morning, you should not hear a bin being dumped. It has to be 500 feet.
One question, before you go, Mark, go back to the question about the 5 years. So if we have we grant an agreement, and after a year, we find that there's all sorts of problems, we have to go for 5 years?
There's a difference. This is if in a year there were changes in the law, and this might have some bearing on whether it's a 5-year, an 8-year, or a 7-year, but the thought process would be it'd be about 5 years before there might be changes in the laws that would require the city, or the city might decide, well, we don't want to do this type of franchising anymore. This would be on a general overall franchise basis. If an individual hauler gets a franchise and there's problems with them operating under the franchise, or they're not doing pursuant to it, then we can terminate the franchise without a 5-year notice.
Well, that's what I thought I read, but then I got confused. Thank you.
Okay, that's all. We'll open it up to public.
Can I just show you real quick the one map?
Sure.
I've been dying to show this to someone. Yeah, this is just, now, this doesn't have anything to do, take off the commercial hat, but this is the residential collection, because there were quite a few questions on that last time, and I'll run through it real quick. These are the areas of the city that the staff collects, manual collection today. This is the Newport Coast area that we will be coming to council very shortly with with a contract that is going out to bid for automated service. That entire area in Newport Coast is automated collection. Curbside automated collection will be going out to bid for that very quickly. If you missed it, Bonita Canyon HOA is the small green area there. That was annexed from the city of Irvine, I believe around 2000, but don't hold me to that. I know it was prior to the coast, but that area was picked up from the city of Irvine. That is waste management automated collection as well. That's one HOA. That one you probably missed, so here, I'm going to go back. Now I'm going to press it again. Right to the left of the green, you're going to see a little dot come up. That's Belcourt Park HOA. That's an interesting setup. The city staff collects all of the curbside residential collection in the HOA. There's a small area in the center where cans are taken out from behind gates, and Waste Management takes care of that part of it. Santa Ana Heights, that area in the light purple there is actually run by Costa Mesa Sanitary District or Sanitation District. That, in conferring with the city attorney's office, that is a district and is not under the jurisdiction of the city. So the district will go ahead and make their arrangements for trash service. And finally, way off to the left, Newport Terrace Collection. Part of the planning agreement for those homes out there is that they would take care of their own refuse collection. And they are currently, again, automated with Waste Management. So that's the mix of residential collection in the city. With that, I'm done.
Cool map.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mark. With that, we'll open it up for public comment. Is there anybody from the public who would like to comment on this? Seeing no one?
We'll discuss this tonight.
It will if I can fix my chair. All right. I think that was our last agenda item for our study session. So we will adjourn now to, public comments on non-agenda items. Seeing none, we're adjourned to closed session.